Right now, I think that the most important things that we are trying to solve is trust, control, and consistency of the translations.
All right, and welcome to another episode of Slator Pod. Today on the podcast, we welcome Artur Nowakowski. So Artur is the co-founder and CTO of language technology platform, AI translation platform Laniqo. Hi, Artur, and thanks so much for joining today.
Hi, Florian. Thank you very much for having me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, this is the first episode in like 3 weeks or something. So thanks for breaking the summer break for us here. So Artur, where are you recording this from today? What country, what city?
Currently in Poznań, in Poland, where I'm recording from our office in the middle of the city. It's quite hot today, but it shouldn't be an issue today.
I was complaining about it in the last couple episodes. I'm complaining about it today. We've had this like three-month heat wave over here in Europe. So anyway, cool. So look, let's talk a bit first about your background. You have a very strong background in academia and then kind of journey to co-founding Laniqo. As I understand that Laniqo grew out of the MT research at Adam Mickiewicz University. And so, tell me a bit first when you maybe tell us a bit more about your academic background, and then like when you realized kind of that research that you were working on, could maybe become a viable commercial product.
Regarding the history of co-founding Laniqo, it's quite an unusual and interesting story. It's probably worth mentioning from the beginning that the Adam Mickiewicz University has a long history of research in machine translation. Right now, it's about 30 years, starting from rule-based machine translation, then going through statistical, then neural. Also, it's worth mentioning that Marian NMT framework that was then later developed at University of Edinburgh and Microsoft was initially developed at our university. And then right now still going, research is going strong with the LLMs. So in 2022, when I was doing my PhD, the Center for Artificial Intelligence was founded at the AMU, and I was the leader of the machine translation team, which was quite small back then. There was only me and a few master students, and we decided to take part in WMT in 2022, where we took part only in two language directions. It was from Czech to Ukrainian, Ukrainian to Czech. But we managed to win the share task back then, beating all of the other constrained and unconstrained solutions. And it turned out to be quite a big achievement that was quite populated in the media. And after some time, PONS Langenscheidt from Germany reached out to us saying that, they've been looking for a very strong team with a research background in machine translation, and that they would like they would like to try to collaborate with us and maybe start a company in the future. So this basically a history at our win and the share task turned into a larger industrial endeavor and a few months later we founded the company.
So PONS, that's PONS for those who don't know, used to be like way back in it was like a dictionary company, right? So I used, when I did my translation study, obviously I had my PONS, right? And then as kind of a book. So obviously they've evolved very much over time. So they are now like an investor, an owner. Is it kind of a joint venture, or how does that work?
So they are the main investor and an owner of the company since the beginning. And also Adam Mickiewicz University itself is also a shareholder in the company. So we are like a spin-off from both worlds, from the university and from PONS Langenscheidt as the main investor. And they are still, and they're using our products in the German market and acting more as a distributor right now of the technology.
So maybe let's go to like it's a very young company, right? So what's your, I guess, elevator pitch? Like what problem are you ultimately trying to solve for businesses?
Right now, I'd say it's three things. It's trust, control, and consistency of the translations. Right now we are in the post-LLM era. When the company started, when there was idea for the company, there wasn't ChatGPT even, like in the middle of 22. But right now, I think that the most important things that we are trying to solve is first of all the security of the translation. So what we all do is based on open source models that can be that are fully private, can be also deployed on premises. We are also solving the adaptations for to specific brands like e-commerce, medical, or automotive, for example, where we adapt the translations to the specificity of the brand with the glossaries, translation memories, style guides, specific preserving. When we are translating documents, we also are preserving the layout of some very specific documents. That's not I don't think this is a solved problem yet.
We had somebody on the podcast from based in Singapore who did this. We basically built a company razor focused on preserving the documents just for the finance space, right? So yeah, it is a tough one. Now, why don't we dwell a little bit on this kind of the 2022, 2023 moment, right? So you started like literally a few months before ChatGPT. Like, how did that feel? Like you started something, you had an idea, the thing came out, we all played with it, and that kind of the rest is history, right? But you're still here, we're recording this podcast, and your company works. So walk us through the different kind of moments and the thinking you had when you realized, okay, there's a kind of a revolution happening here, and I'm at the absolute epicenter of it.
Yeah, those are quite pivotal moment for us in the 2020, in the middle of 23, I think, when the LLMs actually started getting better at translation. Because in the beginning, when ChatGPT came out, still for some period of time, standard NMT models were still faster and even better in quality. But the longer that time went, we all saw that the LLMs are just more versatile and can be used for many more things than just translation. But from the very beginning, we've been building our product and with the whole approach in mind that we should be able to easily swap the main technical things that are sitting inside the product. So in our case, we started, of course, with NMT models that we build ourselves and embedded them into the product. And then in 23 and 24, we had to switch to LLMs because, but the way we did it is that we used open source LLMs that we are able to control, we are able to fine tune. So we are not just taking things off the shelf and embedding them in the application. And that allowed us to make sure that our product is more versatile and that that we are not 100% reliant only on NMT models, because if NMT models would be our main product, then it would be very, very difficult for a company to stay above the water.
So you mentioned open source. Like, there's been so much talk recently about open source with the LLMs, with all the Chinese models coming out, and then these various kind of rankings being on par with the closed source ones. What are your thoughts around that and its relevance for AI translation?
From what I see, even in the benchmarks, is that right now LLMs, especially commercial ones, are very good at the generic translation quality. It's very, very hard to beat them. But in our case, when we approached this problem, We usually experiment with multiple open source models, like including Chinese ones, European ones, US ones, and then we try to find the best that fits to our problem. And that was also what we describe in our research papers. But right now, I think the ability that you are able to take the open source models, but fine tune it on the data to make it very specific to the problem, to the specificity of the domain, is very important. And also regarding for example, the sovereignty and the privacy of these models, like you are able to host them yourselves in a European data center, which is very important for the customers that are relying on, let's say there is a EU AI Act coming in with the new regulations that are right now, and there will be more. And I think the open source models allow us to keep this more private and more laser focused to specific domains, to specific customers.
What about language coverage? I mean, you mentioned before Czech, Ukrainian. On many of the kind of business relevant language combinations, do you feel that we've reached a kind of a plateau? It works well now. Yeah, you as a provider of kind of at scale machine translation, and we talk about it later for e-commerce, for example, like you're taking these models, you're customizing it, and then you launch them. But like the underlying models are good at most language combinations now, or like in some areas they're still lacking?
I would say that it heavily depends on the language pair. For some of the languages that are very high resource, let's say German, English, Spanish, French, the quality is quite high for most of the open source models. For the lower resource ones, there is a much more work to be done still. For example, with the Allegro case, that we'll probably talk more in a second. We are more focused on this region-specific languages, such as Polish to Czech to Hungarian, Slovak, Ukrainian, and in these languages, the open source models are not there is still room to improve. And the further we go, like if we would go to some more rare language combinations, even in African languages, then there is still a very large gap, I think, in both commercial and open source models.
So you mentioned Allegro. I think they're on your website also as a key customer, right? So for those of our listeners who are not familiar with the company, tell us a bit more about Allegro. And then you mentioned some of the challenges being, the language combinations here with languages that are less well covered by AI translation. But what are some of the other challenges? So first, quick intro to Allegro, and then some of the other challenges for AI translation in e-commerce.
So Allegro is the e-commerce company, actually the largest e-commerce company in the Central and Eastern Europe right now. They originate from Poland, from Poznań, and in the past few years they've expanded into Czechia, Slovakia, and Hungary, and we've been helping them with this challenge of expanding into new countries. If originally the product catalog you have is hundreds of millions of offers covering multiple domains, they wanted to have a very accurate translations that would allow customers in this other markets to be able to buy these products and not lose credibility at the same time. So the translations had to be of quite good, of the quality that would not make customers not trust the company. And I think there are a few big problems here when you are doing this at such a big scale that you have hundreds of millions of offers each day. There are thousands of new coming in that have to be translated. So first of all, I would say it's a deployment and scalability problem that in this case, if you were to use just a big LLM and try to translate everything, then the cost would go into millions of dollars, and that's something you will usually want to optimize. So in this case, we are providing custom models for this domain. Where we focused also on mostly on things like terminology, because in e-commerce you have, like, for example, you're translating an offer title, a product title. It's usually like 4 words, 5 words, so you have to be able to also introduce more context into the translation, like instead of relying on just these 4 or 5 words. Introducing that external context, such as more product information, metadata, images, has also been This have also been a very big issues that we had to solve.
I mean, you solved it, I guess, right now. It's like fully operational, been for years, or like, is it still a big challenge when they roll out new campaigns, or is it kind of ticking over quite nicely?
I mean, we've been collaborating with Allegro since 2022. So, I mean, even before the company was founded, we started the collaboration as the university and then continued the company. But I mean, the launch into this new market has been successful, and there are like customers trusting the output of the translation. But at the same time, we are now experiencing other issues that we are solving. For example, if you are translating at such a big scale, you have to be sure to also limit some critical errors, and it's very difficult to limit these errors at such a scale, because if, for example, you have a team of linguists, they are not able to verify hundreds of millions of offers. So what we are also working right now on is to develop a quality estimation, quality assurance workflows that make these things easier. For example, that you automatically try to detect errors in as many offers or product listings as possible, and then humans can verify them, and this also makes their work faster and easier. That you do not have to guess where might the error be. You get a list of you already get a list of text where with highlighted issues, for example.
MTQE, very tricky one to work on. So when you talk to customers or leads other than Allegro, what are some of the kind of key questions in mid 2026 when you come in with an AI translation pitch?
We usually talk to companies that are relying very much on security and privacy right now, because government agencies or government organizations and medical ones, so they usually want to make sure that what they translate is safe. So this includes usually the questions are about the security on premise and how we deal with that. Also, like I mentioned, in the case of Allegro, there is we usually approach cases that, well, people usually have some translation engine that they've been using for years. I mean, it's usually quite hard to get into this market, and to people that have established workflows and established engines that they usually been using for at least a few years. So then there is a much bigger focus on MTQE and automated post-editing side. That they get output from the translation. From the translation, and they may already have, but they usually have no idea about the quality of the outputs. So then what we can offer them is this approach to better detect and highlight errors in such translations, so that their post-editing process is much easier. So these are usually the LQA teams in such organizations.
How do you generate leads? Like, what's your approach to business development? Like, are you going out there and like doing it yourself? Do you have a team? Is it inbound? How does it work?
I mean, this is split into a few different categories. So, one thing, as I mentioned, we have PONS as a distributor in the DACH market, where the brand, that the company is over a century old, and the people are they trust the brand and the quality that comes with the brand usually. So, I mean, we have both like inbound and outbound channels, and usually I think inbound is right now more effective. That's usually people that have some real existing issues with the current approaches, with their current workflows. For example, like it's with this MTQE or better adaptation to their specific domain. They come to PONS because they trust the brand and they trust the quality. On the other side, in Poland, we also are approaching this from the other side. Like we are a university spin-off, and Adam Mickiewicz University is one of the top 3 universities in the country. So this way it's easier for us to approach people to say hello, hi, we are coming from the university. We have research background, credibility in the research papers, and it usually makes the conversation much easier. That the customers have they know that they are talking to people that have some scientific background in this field.
So you recently launched something called Format, and we spoke about it briefly before. So it's Format with a capital F, capital M, capital T. So it's, I guess, would you call it a product or a feature? And then what does it do? Like in obviously preserving the format, but yeah, tell us more.
Format was actually a data set that we created and we published recently, two months ago at the AMT conference. And it's a result, it's connected to a feature that we've been developing, because one of the main features of our product is document translations, and also in that document translation is the PDF translation. And one of the main issues in PDF translation right now, especially if we are talking about scans or other PDF documents that have no text layer, is the difficulty of translating that documents while preserving the layout. So I mean, you can easily extract the text via OCR methods or some other methods, but actually preserving the layout in the output file for PDFs is a difficult problem. So Format we created while we've been working on the approach for much more novel approach for PDF translation. It's basically a data set and a benchmark of around 4,000 PDF across 15 language pairs. And we used it to verify our approach to this problem. Like in the standard scenario, like most industry providers do when you are translating a PDF, you are basically relying on conversion to Microsoft Word or some other format, and that usually tends to break the the layout of the document. So what we did instead is that we combine OCR methods with vision language models, and we basically reconstruct the document from scratch without relying on this conversion to Microsoft Office. And this data set allowed us to properly verify that we are doing this correctly.
And so others can use that too. And you said you launched it or you introduced it at EMTA, or?
We introduced it at EAMT.
I keep getting those mixed up. There's a couple of those. Yes, EAMT.
It's a sister conference of AMTA. But yeah, anyone can use it. It's published on Hugging Face. We are looking forward to actually people using it because that's proper layout preservation of PDFs is still a very is a big problem in MT. And I mean, we are developing methods that can treat this problem better. And in the near future, we may have new papers with better approach to this issue.
Also, you have something called language resource creation, right? The offering. So, like, who's using this? You're using it internally. Is there clients can use it, partners can use it? Tell us more about that.
It's a relatively new feature that we have embedded in our product. It's basically like maybe coming from the problem. The customers that we approach, especially some smaller customers, they usually have a history of translated documents, but they don't have any style guides, translation memories, glossaries, and they would like to use our product. But the main selling point of our product is the adaptation to customers' language and their specificity. So this language resource creation module is basically a creator of glossaries and translation memories that you are able to upload historical documents in multiple formats, in PDFs, Microsoft Office, PowerPoint presentations, etc. And it basically creates these resources for you. And it also filters them via our QE, so that what the customer sees as the output is not just randomly aligned fragments of sentences, but instead already a list of proper terms or segments in translation memory that they can just directly use in their translations.
Is this mostly like a customer onboarding tool for you, or so basically I mean, the scenario to me would be marginally sophisticated company that has a certain amount of already kind of translated or content in the past, localized content. They're coming in, they want to work with you, but again, they don't have a sophisticated kind of TMX kind of repository, right? Is that accurate, or does anybody else use it?
I think there are two main use cases. Like the first one is, as you mentioned, is the onboarding one, that someone doesn't have any resources and wants to use it. And the other is that someone has already translation memories or glossaries, but they are quite noisy, let's say. We usually have we have that experience with companies that preserve translation memories that have been creating translation memories for the past dozen years. These translation memories are then quite big, and at the same time they are quite noisy. And they can use this automated filtering methods with our QE to clean these resources, because if they would use these resources as they are, there is high chance that they could break something in the translation rather than fixing it.
You mentioned QE, so is that CompactQE, or is the CompactQE still kind of experimental? Because I read up that you're using kind of smaller open weight LLMs for CompactQE.
This is actually CompactQE is this is the product. This is part of the product that we have embedded in our application. I mean, usually when we come to research and mixing the product with research, it usually is that we have some industry problem that we want to solve. We do some research and we write the results in a research paper. But in the case of CompactQE, like we did a lot of experiments with these open source models, and we wanted to find a way to approach this problem better, so that we do not only give the score from 0 to 100 like with some other methods, but at the same time, rather than just a score, we highlight the error spans that are in the text, including the MQM categories, and we give the corrections, proposed corrections for each error, and at the same time we give the whole post-edition proposition that the translator can either approve or not as a correction. So then basically when they go through the document, they already see where the errors are.
So you still have a very strong connection to the research kind of community, if I understand this correctly. You go to the conferences, you publish papers. If I'm running a startup and I want to get traction, want to talk to clients, like what's your tangible benefit of kind of keeping one foot in that research community? Like you could also argue like, hey, like I've done my part, I've published my papers, I got my PhD, now it's time to build and scale and do all the kind of corporate stuff.
Yeah, I think for the company of our size, as we are quite small, like keeping in touch with research and publishing new papers every year, the biggest benefit it gives us credibility, because we can evaluate our approaches at, for example, at WMT, or even when reviewers are reviewing our paper and they accept it for a conference, it gives some sort of confirmation that what we are doing is in the right direction. And for the company of our size, like it gives we do not have budgets like for marketing and sales, like a company is 100 times our size, so it acts as a big credibility factor that when we approach customers, that we can highlight that. And also at the same time we are collaborating with universities, especially with Adam Mickiewicz University. We are there is also an industrial PhD program in Poland, and that involves like when a PhD student that's employed 100% time at the company, and there is an agreement between a university and the company, and we have a few such PhD students that they are able to finish their PhD, do their PhD that's related to the work done at the company. And at the same time, to do this PhD, they have to publish some research papers.
So to close off, what are some of your priorities in the next, for the next, I don't know, second half of 2026 and maybe heading into 2027?
Regarding product, I think the biggest priorities would be going more multimodal. Right now we are because right now we've been mostly focused on the text translation, but we see that for example, going more into the voice or images is usually could be the right direction to go. And at the same time, we want to explore things like in the language AI area that are not strictly related to just machine translation. Because right now we see that let's say even right now and in the next few years, it might be even more difficult. That the market for just text translation is quite saturated right now, and with the LLMs, having a very good quality for generic text, going deeper into the domains is I think one way, and also going more into on the privacy, but well, we see that in the next few years, we should go and extend what we are doing outside of just translation.
All right. So if people are looking for Laniqo, it's written with a Q, so LANIQO.com. So head over there and check out Laniqo. Well, Artur, thank you so much for taking the time today. This was great.